here for the NFC and AFC North. I'm super stoked. We've been waiting for this one, Mark, for quite some time. We saved the best for last, but I did want to throw this your way before we dive in today because
All right.
I saw this meme and it was hilarious. And we just saw today that Adam Thielen was traded to the Vikings.
Yes.
So the meme goes, it's 2025 and Amari Cooper is a Raider, Adam Thielen is a Viking, Keenan Allen is a Charger, and Brandon Cooks is a Saint. That is pretty funny.
It is. It's pretty cool.
Back, familiar faces back in familiar places.
Yeah, kind of cool. And it definitely feels like a kind of a last dance for all of them. You know what I mean? At this point, especially for Allen, for Thielen, Amari Cooper and Brandon Cooks wouldn't shock me if they're still around next year. You know what I mean? And contributing, especially because when we get in today's preview, one of the things I had to remind myself in a kind of a shocker as we're going through this, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing this exercise before we start the season, is I'm like, oh crap, DeAndre Hopkins is on the Ravens. Like there's those moments still as I'm looking through some of these rosters going like, oh wow, that guy is there right now. And so the Adam Thielen trade, one of the bigger pieces of news. He's back in Minnesota purple, and I hate that for my Bears week 1, and I hate that for Bryce Young down in Carolina. That wide receiver core is young.
Very, very young.
Young with a capital Y, Bryce Young. And so that's going to be certainly one of those things to look out for early in the season for Carolina.
No doubt. No doubt. We have one other bit of news to get to before we get into our preview.
Yeah.
But it's pretty awesome to see some of these players circle back to their old teams. Rashee Rice, the suspension came down. It is 6 games. He has accepted that suspension. And so I guess if you're, a Chiefs fan or, someone who had Rashee Rice on your fantasy team, you at least have clarity now because there was the option of getting into the season and not knowing if a suspension could come down at any moment. And then you're kind of in limbo. At least now there is a clear 6-game absence for Rashee Rice, and he'll be entering midseason with the Kansas City Chiefs.
It makes the Sky Moore trade even more interesting. I wonder if Kansas City didn't realize that was going to be this soon. I think they thought he was going to start the season, and there was kind of that September deadline, and that he might get to play the first 4 weeks, and then we'll see what happens. They're really thin, really, really thin at the wide receiver position to start. We talked about them just a couple of days ago. I think even more important for Travis Kelce and Noah Gray to be huge factors in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned them, so they're going to have to lean into that early in the season now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, listen, 6 games, is that appropriate for everything that Rashee Rice has kind of done early in his career?
Yeah.
You know what? I don't know. I'm not into the judgment. He obviously needed to face some sort of punishment from the league. He's avoided actual jail time and punishment in those regards at this point in time. So, I have a hard time when the NFL, when a guy is not actually found guilty of something, I have a hard time for the NFL giving ginormous suspensions. This is a big suspension. 6 games is, a third of the season. So it's certainly nothing to scoff at. A lot of people argue like, well, Deshaun Watson got a whole year. Well, the NFL can argue that was such conduct detrimental to the league, even though you settle and you're not found guilty of something. Just the talk of what you're involved in is such conduct detrimental to the league and the shield and the branding. Rashee Rice, certainly, I think his actions warrant that's not a good look for the NFL. We don't want to be in business with people like that. And I would imagine if Rashee Rice has even one more vehicular slip up or anything like that, you quickly see the NFL come down really, really hard. I'm sure they let him and his agent and the team know that. Like this guy, like this is a big strike, and there's no second strikes. Like the next strike, it's like it's going to be a year or whatever, or we don't need to deal with you.
Yep. No, I totally agree. So Kansas City a little bit thin at the wide receiver position, at least for the first likely half of the season, but getting reinforcements into the back half. All right, without further ado, this is the shortest preamble we've had so far because we are talking the NFC and AFC North. You're damn right I put Aaron Rodgers and Caleb Williams in the thumbnail.
Those are our guys. Our guys.
Definitely back-to-back division winners representing on there. Look, we had to be homers at least a little bit for this episode. I don't have too much of a preference, Mark. If we go NFC or AFC, I think we've been starting NFC. So if you want, we can just kind of go with that and kick things off. I'll start us off with the Detroit Lions.
Love it.
Very, very interesting evaluation for this team going into the season because we all know what their ceiling can be when everything is, going well, when Dan Campbell is at the helm, when Jared Goff is healthy, and even when their defense is not healthy. We've seen it go quite well for them, except for the, end of the season starting to fall apart a little bit and showing those cracks that we knew were eventually going to happen. All of that is to say, we don't know what this team will be without its top two play callers on both sides of the ball. They've dealt with similar adversity in the past, but we're talking about Ben Johnson, who is regarded as the top play caller in all of football, next to Aaron Glenn, who was one of the better defensive coordinators in the league as well, both leaving to be head coaches in big cities. And it's just a big question mark. This is going to be a very big test for Dan Campbell. I think it's going to show us a lot about what the staying power of his culture. And honestly, I'm not too worried about that. I think they will show this year that it is more about the Jimmys and Joes and the culture that Dan Campbell has built there in Detroit. That's going to keep them in contention for this division. I firmly believe that going into the second half of the year, we're still going to be talking about the Detroit Lions in the driver's seat. Now, whether there's going to be other teams that we're talking about saying they're nipping at their heels, that's, coming later as we go through all of the teams in division. But I feel really confident. Look, they lost Kevin Zeitler. They lost Frank Ragnow. They lost interior offensive line. And they lost their coordinators, but you still got David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. You still have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm actually really excited to see what Jameson Williams will build on from his 2 years of momentum that he's garnered as a big play threat. He was really coming on to the back half of last season. So if he's able to elevate, give them an even new dimension to this offense, I think people can be pleasantly surprised with, how much this offense is able to carry that momentum over. Defensively is where I have more questions because it's still, there's some really, really good players on this defense, but they did lose some guys. And there was more of a question about how this unit performed as a collective with their coordinator versus the guys. Like I have more faith in Jared Goff and the running backs and the wide receivers to do well in multiple schemes versus I just don't know enough about, how this defense, especially when they pretty much didn't have a full year together last year, how that's going to carry over with a new coordinator and stuff. So that's my biggest question mark going into this. But it's really about banking on the run game staying the same, in my view. Jameson Williams taking the next step offensively, and Jared Goff still avoiding that regression. That's what's going to be needed, I think, for them to stay on top of this division. And, a healthy Aiden Hutchinson certainly would help too.
Dan, I'll say this before we jump into it for both the AFC and the NFC North. There's one common thread for all 8 teams we're going to talk about. These two divisions have, without a doubt, the most brutal schedule. And it's really because partly they play each other. And you're talking about a Lions team that was a 15-win team last year. You're talking about a Vikings team that was a 14-win team last year. You're talking about a Packers team that was an 11-win team last year. Pittsburgh, 10-win team. Cincinnati, 9-win team. Ravens, 12-win team. These are good football teams, Dan. And I think what we're going to see is as I'm starting on the Lions, the schedule is brutal. The schedule is horrific. The schedule is a nightmare. But it's a nightmare for the Lions, for the Vikings, for the Packers, and the Bears, right? Everyone's a nightmare.
Yeah, they're all dealing with it.
We talked about teams that might be a 13, 14-win team, but I don't know how good of a team they're going to be. The Lions and the Patriots could both win 11 games. The Lions might win their division with 11 games. The Patriots might get a wild card with 11 games. But the Lions are going to be, in my opinion, a vastly superior team in the sense that the battles they're going to go through in this season, and that's for every NFC North team. If you're an NFC North team or you're an AFC North team and you make it to the playoffs, you will be absolutely battle-tested. So I'll get to the schedule here just in a second. I want to start by saying one of the things, obviously, that a lot of people are going to focus on with the Lions is this is Dan Campbell's kind of Nick Sirianni year, right? This is the first time you're looking at like, okay, what are you really as a CEO? Dan Campbell is a CEO football coach, like the Harbaughs are CEO football coaches, like a Bill Belichick was kind of a CEO football coach. Now, Belichick obviously leaned defense, you know what I mean? Like the Harbaughs lean their certain ways. Mike Tomlin, a CEO head coach, but leans defense. Dan Campbell's a CEO head coach, but like Nick Sirianni, leans offensive.
Yeah.
You know, in Detroit, I've spent a lot of time in Detroit. My dad's from Detroit. We go to Detroit often. I've been many times in my life, especially more recently. There's always these people. They sell the bumper stickers, they sell the sweatshirts, they sell the koozies, everything. It says Detroit versus everybody. This truly feels for them as Detroit versus everybody. This is a 15-win team that loses two coordinators, but truly otherwise is one of the top 3 most loaded rosters in football, and everyone is predicting them to take a giant step backwards.
Yeah.
Jared Goff is going to be a must-watch early in the season to see what the no Ben Johnson effect is like on him. The 3 years that Ben Johnson was his offensive coordinator, Dan, listen to these numbers. He averaged over 4,500 yards passing, so 17,400 yards in the last 3 years. That's insane. He had 96 touchdown passes. That's 32 touchdown passes a year in the last 3 years. He had only 31 interceptions. That's only 10.33, whatever, 3.5, repeating interceptions. He's been brilliant with Ben Johnson. Absolutely brilliant. And obviously, a lot of that has to do with the weapons they've surrounded him with. This Detroit team is just loaded. Gibbs and Montgomery, St. Brown, Williams, Khalif Raymond, a really solid number 3. And then you look at Laporta as the tight end number 1. Arguably, if someone wanted to really make the argument he's the number 1 tight end in football, I think they'd have a real good case for that. And then you look at an offensive line that you mentioned some subtractions, but you still have 3 of your 5 are all-pro guys with Sewell, Glasgow, and Decker. So, I mean, there's still,
and they invested in the trenches early in the draft. You know,
so there's still a ton of talent, right? And you still have a mentality of a Detroit football team that's going to be punch you in the mouth, biting kneecaps, and we're going to go for it. So I think this Lions team, especially when you talk about the defensive side of the football, it's not just Aiden Hutchinson. This is not the Cincinnati Bengals we're going to talk about. DJ Reader, Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell. These are some really quality high-end football players. Brian Branch. So you have a unit that is more than capable. Now, is it as good as the other defenses in the NFC North? Certainly don't think it's the best, but Aiden Hutchinson might be the best, at top end pure defensive talent in the NFC North. So if he can stay healthy, he was on his way to Defensive Player of the Year last year before getting injured. Lot to love about them. Let's quickly talk about the schedule, though. Dan, this is just the start of the year. At Green Bay, home against Chicago. At Baltimore, home against Cleveland. if you start those 4 games and find a way to be 3-1, that's brilliantly impressive. If they can find a way to be 3-1. You then have at Cincy, at Kansas versus Tampa. I mean, that's an incredibly tough stretch. If you can find yourself at 5-2, even 4-3, I think that's a really positive for this Detroit team.
Absolutely.
You get a bye at that point in time, but then after the bye, Washington, Philly on the road at both, Green Bay again early in the year before Thanksgiving, and then the Rams at Los Angeles. So it's just a ton of big games, a ton of national games, a ton of huge matchups versus teams that we expect to be competing for not only playoff spots, but conference championships.
And 2 divisional road games to end the season as well.
Yeah, so it's a really, really brutal stretch. But again, we're going to be talking about that for every team. I think the Lions, we're going to learn a lot about them weeks 1 through 4, and we're going to learn a lot about what Dan Campbell and this Detroit versus the world versus everybody is made of.
Yep, no question.
All right, I'm going to move on then to the new man on the Minnesota Vikings, J.J. McCarthy, the truly a rookie. I mean, yes, he's a second-year player, but truly a rookie. He really wasn't even remembered last year. He wasn't dressed. He wasn't really practicing. He was a sideline, hold the clipboard guy his whole year. Now, he has a huge advantage compared to the true rookies, is that he was with Kevin O'Connell every single day last year. He was in a room with Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones and a constant, like, not I mean that in a way that's a good thing versus being in a room with Patrick Mahomes, in the sense that Mahomes isn't going to have to talk everything out in a meeting, right? He's going to be able to sit there and go, okay, yeah, I get this. I know what you mean. All right, next, move on, let's go. In that quarterback room, you'd imagine the amount of discussions and the theories and the learning was plentiful. And I'm sure J.J. McCarthy has taken in a ton of that. I don't doubt any of that. With J.J., the key is going to be, the dude suffered a really bad knee injury, basically just running last year in the preseason. We have no idea what his kind of physical capabilities are to withstand an NFL season.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea, what, if anything, he's grown physically, because we still have the same question marks we did. I look back at his draft report. It's like, can he make all the throws? And also, remember, we just talked about with Justin Herbert, how, remember, he went from throwing 700 balls in a year to 500 balls in a year. That's what he did at Michigan. He was the guy who just handed it off a million times and then made the key throw when he had to make the key throw. Now, he's got a ton to work with. Justin Jefferson, no Addison for the first couple games, but you bring in Thielen, and then eventually you'll have Thielen, Addison, Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Hockenson, an above-average offensive line with Darisaw, Ryan Kelly, and Fries. So some really good players up front. And you have arguably the best defensive coordinator in football, certainly a top 3-4 guy, with a really, really physical and young but mixed in veterans. It's an interesting group defensively. They have a lot of youth they've invested in, but then you have names like Jonathan Allen. They bring him over from Washington. Hargrave. You have Harrison Smith. You have Jonathan Grenard as well. So you have this mix of youth and experience with a lethal play caller, Brian Flores. A lot to like about a 14-win Vikings team. I think, again, we're going to know what the Vikings are and if they're truly a competitive football team week 7 on. From weeks 1 through 6, I'm sure they'll stack up some wins and we'll kind of feel J.J. McCarthy out. Week 7, it begins versus Philly, at the Chargers, at Detroit, versus Baltimore. That's a fucking stretch of 4 games for a young quarterback. Then you get a break with Chicago at home, a division rival.
Yeah, and then got to go on the road in 2 very hostile environments.
At Green Bay, at Seattle, and then you get Washington. What a stretch, week 7 through 14. So if you're a Vikings fan, pray that you can stack wins early. Pray that JJ finds confidence early, because week 7 on, it's big boy, big mouth, smash mouth football for a kid who we love his offensive coordinator. I mean, we love his head coach. we love the kind of measurables. We love the talent around him, but we don't love his injury history, and we don't love what we don't know, which is the arm strength. And if he's asked to throw the ball 35 times in a game, he was never even asked to do that in college, let alone the NFL. So there's a lot to rightfully question about a 14-win Vikings team coming back this year.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about this run game too. I want to know how sustainable is it? I mean, they're not getting necessarily any younger in that backfield, right? And so there's definitely questions there, and that's going to be JJ McCarthy's best friend early in the season. They're going to have to be able to establish the run early and often. You said it about stacking wins early. That's what I wrote down for this team, because and it's honestly, it's not really that easy of a start for them. I mean, they have to start at Chicago. That's not easy. That's kind of a tough one, especially with that revamped defense there. They're gonna make it tough on JJ. Atlanta, defensive head coach who has invested a significant amount the last couple of years in high draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. Cincinnati, obviously not a difficult defensive opponent, but certainly going to stress you in terms of putting points on the board. And then you got Pittsburgh and Cleveland, two really good defenses after that. So JJ McCarthy and company, they're going to have to stack wins early in the season because, as you mentioned, it gets so difficult and so tight pretty much after the first quarter of the season. Their entire back three quarters is really, really difficult. So yeah, they're gonna have to find a way, and more importantly, in that initial stretch, can they start early, not just from the standpoint of what the rest of the season holds for them, but can they start early because you don't have that opportunity of getting ramped up. As you mentioned, JJ is basically a rookie, but he's not a rookie. Like people are gonna want a little bit more out of him early on. Like, hey, we're gonna have to kind of be operating at a different level because we don't have the luxury of being able to go through these growing pains. And on top of it all, Jordan Addison's not available early on. So can you stack wins? Can you actually show that you're going to be able to overcome some of these difficult circumstances without one of the top playmakers on your team?
Yeah.
He's going to have to lean on Justin Jefferson, going to have to lean on that run game and hope that Brian Flores dials some stuff up for these offenses early in the year too.
And Dan, you know what's so interesting? The pressure is on O'Connell in a sense, in the way that kind of the pressure was also on the Niners organization when they went with Trey Lance, right? Like, we know you chose now to go with this rookie quarterback in this route over keeping Sam Darnold or whatever else it might have been. And one of the things that really Vikings fans I know were frustrated about at the end of the year last year, in the two biggest games, that Detroit game and then that playoff game, what did Kevin O'Connell not do? He did not stick with the run. He abandoned the run because, again, he's a quarterback. He's an offensive guy. And they made Sam Darnold throw the ball way too much, and Sam crumbled under the pressure, obviously. And then that snowballed into him having to throw the ball more.
Yeah.
Can Kevin O'Connell say to himself, you know what? As much as I want to throw the ball to get back in a game, if they find themselves down, I have to do what's best for my young quarterback. And I have to just say, we're going to eat crow here a little bit and keep running our offense, even if it means another 3 and out or whatever it is. That's going to be interesting to see the struggle for Kevin O'Connell to battle what he wants to do versus what he knows he is limited within doing, or maybe he's not limited at all. Maybe JJ comes out and has a CJ Stroud type, holy crap, where did that come from season. I don't think that would shock anyone too much. He was a first-round draft pick, but I think there's a lot of cautious optimism for sure. And again, like Detroit, this Vikings team might go from 14 to 11 or 10 wins, but they may still be just as good of a team as they were last year. It's just that it's going to be really hard with this schedule, unless you get some massive injury breaks or something, to get to 14 wins. It's just
I just don't
insane.
See it. Yeah, I don't see it, and we'll see. I'm not crazy hyped on JJ McCarthy, but again, we just haven't seen him play at the NFL level, so it's hard to evaluate anything about him. But he wasn't that prolific prospect coming out of college, but then again, he does have Kevin O'Connell the quarterback whisperer.
It's so wild, right?
For him. Yeah.
It's kind of like the opposite of what the Bears were last year. It's like, well, we know we have this kind of number one pick generational talent, but he's with a defensive coach and an organization that's not great. Now it's like, hey, we have this generational talent of a coach offensively that's great, but we have this guy who came from a system where he threw the ball a couple times less than 10 times a game because they just run the ball and dominate. So it's very, very hard to predict.
No question. All right, you get to take us to the next stop.
Yeah, let's go to Green Bay. We'll save Chicago for last. It's an 11-6 team last year. Year 3 for Jordan Love as a starter. So that's a really fun kind of compromise when you look at his 3 years versus like the last 3 years of Jared Goff. Jared Goff, prolific numbers, big time wins. Jordan Love, this year 3, I think, is a really important big year for him and Matt LaFleur. Last year, obviously, he signs the big contract. Injuries kind of plagued him up and down the year. I know he played in 15 games, but he really only, one of them he started but didn't play at all. And the other one he got tweaked. So it's really more like 13 full games that he played. But the numbers weren't terrible, right? It just felt like it was a little bit of CJ Stroud, where it's this kind of come back to earth after that really. I'm getting a phone call, so I don't know. I think that just I don't know if I left or not. I don't know. You can tell me. Am I back?
No, you're here. You're here.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, it pops up on my. I have a Mac and an iPhone, so if you know that struggle, it pops up on there too. I think what the point I'm trying to make is like it wasn't. I wouldn't say a disaster for you. I mean, this is an 11-win team, but I think after the big contract, it's still that just kind of like.
It was a little underwhelming.
It was underwhelming, but the injuries. So for him, it's like, can you stay healthy? And then can you get to 30-plus touchdowns, 4,000-plus yards? And obviously, you look at then his weapons. So then you turn your focus to that. And it's the biggest question with Green Bay. In a weird way, I know I don't want this to seem like it's just a homer thing, but I truly think if you go just off of the depth charts, it's close, but I think Green Bay has the least amount of talent overall, I would argue, in the NFC North. But I think what Green Bay has going for it is maybe the best culture in the NFC North, probably the best culture. I know the best culture. I'll talk myself into it. And then
Gamble might have something to say about that.
Yeah, and then they have a head coach who completely owns the locker room and is extremely detail-oriented, very offensive-minded, and very, very talented. So they have the coaching that I think can make up for the fact that it's a lot more B- guys versus B+, A- guys. Let's talk about the weapons. Josh Jacobs is their prolific weapon, in my opinion. He was fantastic last year. He got overshadowed by Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, but he was the third best running back in the league last year. Extremely consistent, gaudy numbers, and I don't expect anything to change with that. He's in the prime of his career, like Saquon, unlike Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. And this offensive line for the Packers is still extremely solid. Again, it's no star power. We're not talking about a Trent Williams here, or for years you had Bakhtiari or Balagda. There's none of those star names, but it's an offensive line that in 2 or 3 years from now, you could be talking about some of these guys like those are some of the best at their positions in the league if they develop the way Green Bay always develops their offensive lines. Beyond that, though, it's a lot of question marks. Obviously, the first rounder, Golden from Texas, huge upside. You kind of hope he becomes the consistent, he's our guy. You have Reed, you have Dobbs, you have Wicks. So you have 4 guys who all feel very, even though they're not all this physically the same, they all feel like the same. Like none of them are top 10 guys. All of them you could see putting up 850, 900 yards, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. The big play threat, Watson, he starts the season on the pup, so he'll eventually come back. And then you look at that and you say, God, that's a logjam of dudes, like of just kind of B-, B+ guys. Maybe Golden can be the one who pops and becomes the true number one. I think they hope that. And then obviously Tucker Kraft at tight end is very solid, but he's not anything you're drafting him in the 6th round of your fantasy draft. So it's a solid offensive line. It's a solid weapons group. It's a solid defense up front, especially Quay Walker, Van Ness, Clark, Gary. Up front is where the talent is on that defense. It's going to make the back end better because they're talented up front. And so I would say if you're going guy for guy, bar for bar, Green Bay, I think, has the fourth best roster overall in this division. Now,
I think you're probably right.
Now, if you include coaching staff and everything, I would think with the unknowns of Ben Johnson and with the unknowns of what Detroit has without their brain drain, maybe you can make the argument that it's they're tied with, kind of Minnesota, Chicago, and Detroit's just a notch above them. Dan, as far as their schedule goes,
yikes.
3 through 9 is where they got to stack wins. Weeks 3 through 9 at Cleveland, at Dallas, Cincy, at Arizona. You've got to find a way to go 3-1 in that stretch. And then you have at Pittsburgh, Carolina. Obviously, there'll be an Aaron Rodgers emotional factor in that Pittsburgh game. But if you're Green Bay, you've got to think to yourself, that's a win. We've got to find a way to make happen. Carolina is obviously a must-win game if they're on your schedule at this point. You're thinking playoffs. And then, Dan, I will say this, the end of their schedule, if they're battling, right, if they're 7-5, if they are, and week 12 comes around and you're Green Bay and you're saying, let's make this push for the playoffs, and it's
5
a big
divisional games.
It's a big if, but if Chicago and Minnesota are right there with you, say Chicago, Minnesota, and Green Bay all around week 12 are all 7-5 well, then the back half of the Packers schedule is really tough because if the Bears and Minnesota are battling if just as good, if not better than Green Bay, they have 2 against Minnesota, 2 against Chicago, Detroit, at Denver, and Baltimore is their final games this season. So a lot on the line there with the division. And so if I'm Green Bay, again, can I see them getting to 11 wins? Absolutely. And I think if they get to 11 wins this year, they're probably a better team than they were last year. They might be, just going in the line what I've talked about Minnesota and Detroit. Their win total might decrease or it might stay the same, but I think they might actually be a better team than they were the year before.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one for me to fully agree with you on, but I will say I agree that it's a huge year for Jordan Love. And it's one of those where they have that stretch 3-9, as you mentioned, that is gettable. To me, outside of Jordan Love, because obviously like the quarterback's always gonna matter the most. I think there are some of these teams that we've talked about where it's warranted to discuss and say it's a huge factor, such as the JJ McCarthy's, or we'll get to Aaron Rodgers coming up soon. Jordan Love obviously needs to play well for this team to play well, but I think the bigger factor is Matthew Golden the true number one? Because they can't go this long without having a true number one wide receiver on the team, at least talent wise. And that's been a thorn in their side for some time. And they've still been able to have 11, 12 win seasons despite that. But we've seen it kind of come. They really haven't been able to get the big play in the postseason. And I do think that's large in part due to who they've had at their core group of weapons. The non-divisional games is also as concerning to me as, yes, is this division going to be tough and good? Yeah. They're non-divisional games with Washington, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Philly, Denver. Like, that's a really, really tough non-divisional game slate on top of it. So, I mean, as you mentioned, that back half stretch can be really, really tough if Chicago and Minnesota are contenders. And that's not even factoring in some teams that we know will be contenders, or at least very much should be contenders come that time of the year. They didn't do much in the offseason. Can you name any notable thing that they did? Not really. They been kind of a quiet team.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was drafting a wide receiver in the first round for the first time in however long.
Yeah.
So that, I think there's going to be a spotlight on that too, because it is the first time that they've done it. I think it's going to have to work out. But I really do think
I have questions about the defense, certainly, but as the front four is, they're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to, pressure guys quite often, but that can get leaky pretty quick. And does this offense have the ability to go toe to toe and compete in a shootout? That's really where I'm wondering, and I'm just not really high on Green Bay going into this year. Now, that being said, they're that team that, despite any lack of hype, will find a way to get 10 wins and sneak their way in. But yeah, in terms of the makeup, probably fourth worst roster, as you mentioned. And in terms of optimism of what they can be and what they'll do, I'm not feeling great about how they stack up. The division is starting to catch up to them overall, and that's a problem for Matt LaFleur and company, no doubt. But huge year for Jordan Love. He's got to show that he can be the guy, because they're likely going to need to turn to him a few times this year. I mean, you see like Baltimore, that's probably going to be a shootout game. Yeah. Washington, that's probably going to be a game that they need to score a lot of points. Eagles, the Bears late in the season. Yeah, it's they're going to have to put up points.
I think it goes without saying. We've talked about this now, through every division. It's if your team's going to make the playoffs, you're good. It's like every year you're going to need breaks to go your way. You're going to need to steal a game or two, and you're going to need your quarterback to play really, really well and at a high level. And I think Green Bay, with their roster the way it is, they've just now, it's a little bit more on Love to say, we need you to be, a first-round draft pick. We need you to start rounding into the next Hall of Famer here in Green Bay, because that's what Aaron Rodgers did so well. Remember, Jordy Nelson, was it Jordy Nelson who was great, or was it Aaron Rodgers who made Jordy Nelson great? You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, Aaron elevated guys, Brett elevated guys, and I think that's just kind of Green Bay's game plan. We're going to give you some guys. You find a way to elevate them. This is on you. This is the way we work here in Green Bay. You want to be Bart Starr. You want to be Brett Favre. You want to be Aaron Rodgers. We're going to give you enough, and now you have to go be special. They're the one organization, I think, that just builds their franchise that way. We've seen it historically. So we'll see if Jordan Love can make that step.
Absolutely.
All right. The 5-12 Chicago Bears. If this is your first foray into the football lounge, the Bears are my life, besides my wife and children, and they are something that I think too much about, and I live and die by. Dan, I want to take you back to a really, really amazing moment. Week 18. The Chicago Bears were on a 9-game losing streak. They were on an interim head coach who had started the year as an offensive assistant, who had then become an offensive coordinator, and then got the head coach job. This was a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams, who had been on his third offensive coordinator. And the Chicago Bears, Week 18, are taking on at a record of 4-12, the 11-5 Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. And what do the Chicago Bears do? They put on an all-time performance, a gutsy performance, and they break the streak of losing. They break the streak of losing to the Packers. They hadn't beaten them in 5 years almost. And they get themselves a victory. And what do they do from that moment on? Well, what they did, Dan, was they got exponentially better. There is not a team during this offseason I think you can look at and says got better in more areas and a farther jump forward. And this is all projections, right? Because they haven't played any of the games yet, but projecting better than the Chicago Bears. They get the head coach who's been the darling of the past 2 years. And listen, the only reason you could argue Mike Vrabel, the better coach this offseason, he was going to go to New England. That was his job, whatever it might be. Ben Johnson was then. Everyone else wanted Ben Johnson. He chose Chicago. So you have a giant upgraded coach. He brings in a really immense coaching staff with Dennis Allen, who just had a run as a head coach, his second run as a head coach, but a very successful defensive coordinator, a top 5 defensive coordinator to come in and lead this defense of the next monsters of the Midway. And what else do they do, Dan? Well, in the draft, they target a wide receiver number 3 in Luther Burden, this stud from Mizzou, who's wowing a lot of people at camp, but he doesn't have any pressure on him because they have a clear-cut number 1 in DJ Moore and a clear-cut number 2 in Roma Dunze. They go out and they get a tight end number 1 with a first-round draft pick and a guy who is the now prototype of what we look at the modern NFL tight end. He looks like when you look at Travis Kelce, long, fast, looks like a wide receiver, a big physical wide receiver, to pair with their tight end, who's already a very above average successful tight end in Cole Kmet. So you make that weapon group deeper and better. But they don't stop there. They look at the offensive line, in which Caleb Williams was sacked 68 times, an unacceptable amount of times.
David Carr.
A lot of those sacks are on Caleb, but a lot of those sacks were on the absolute disaster that was the players at the offensive line position. They go out and they get the best free agent. They get the best free agent center, Drew Dahlman, who's a top 5 center in the league. They go out and they get the best guard, you could argue, in the NFL, and a future Hall of Famer in Joe Tooney, who's on the back half of his career, but still playing extremely quality, high quality Pro Bowl level football. They go out and they get Jonah Jackson, who was very successful as a young player in Detroit with Ben Johnson, gets a big contract in LA, gets really injured. LA says, we're going to move on from you, and finds his way to Chicago fully healthy. And then you get back your left tackle and your right tackle starters from last year, and you go out, you push your starting left tackle, who's the weak spot of your team in Braxton Jones, with a 6'8", 312 second-round pick from Boston College named Ozzie Trapillo. This kid who had a really great start to camp, and a lot of people who I trust were expecting him to steal the job. Like a lot of rookies, they come back to earth, and camp settles in, and they get the shit kicked out of them.
Yeah, their lumps.
And they take their lumps. But I fully expect that by middle of the season, especially if Braxton Jones has any signs of struggle, Ozzie Trapillo is going to be the future left tackle to protect Caleb Williams' blind side. Caleb Williams. So you have all of that added. Plus, they don't stop there. I say they add Dennis Allen on defense, and they go out and they get themselves a physical presence, a future maybe Hall of Famer, definitely Hall of Very Good player, and a tone setter in Grady Jarrett. You know, people have been begging, like, Ben Johnson, go get someone opposite Montez Sweat. Well, let's get someone right next to Montez Sweat, who Montez Sweat is a physical freak and a great player, but he's not an emotional or vocal leader. That's what Grady Jarrett is. And Grady Jarrett, obviously, Dennis Allen knows him from his time in the NFC South. He comes in on the defensive side of the ball, and you add it with those 2 linebackers, Edwards and Edmonds. You add it with Gervon Dexter and Montez Sweat up front. And then maybe the best back end in football with Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon at your corners, with Stevenson as well, Kevin Byard and Brisker as your safeties. Now, Brisker apparently did get injured today, so I'm not 100% sure on his health and what kind of severity that is. This is a football team that got exponentially better. You had a quarterback in Caleb Williams last year who everyone is shitting on, and yet when you look at his stats, 62% completion percentage, 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Now,
it was a fine year. And honestly, also, if that was Bo Nix, people would have been like, wow, yeah, Bo Nix might have 11, something here,
11 yards away from 500 yards rushing. So a real danger on the ground. Now, Dan, imagine if the sacks go from 68 to a still insanely high number, but 40, right? Imagine how much different that will look. You eliminate a sack a game. Imagine if that number goes from 68 to 30 and you eliminate almost 2 sacks a game. And I think that alone is possible with this offensive line and with a coach who you already saw from the great one drive in that second preseason game when all the pressure was on. Caleb didn't play in the first preseason game. He's hiding Caleb because Caleb's struggling. And what does he do? And he comes out and he leads a 90-plus yard drive for a touchdown in which he was 6 for 10, very decisive. No ball was in his hands for longer than 6 seconds. 2 tight end sets, and he was under center for the majority of the drive. All of that is great signs pointing in the right direction. And now we have to talk about the fact that, like I've talked about with every team so far in this division, the schedule is a fucking nightmare. And this Chicago Bears team was 5-12 last year. I expect the Bears to be closer to an 8-9 win team because of the talent on the roster and because of the momentum they have going right now with this new coaching staff and their young quarterback. The early week 5 bye, I don't like. The only thing I like about it is the fact that if there are struggles offensively or whatever it might be, it could be a chance for them to actually reset early in the season before things get too out of hand. And Dan, the other thing I like about it is after the bye, you have a really important 4-game stretch in which you only have one game you're going to be favored in. 6 through 9 is
3 road games.
Yeah, 6 through 9 is at Washington, home against New Orleans, at Baltimore, at Cincinnati. And so you're going to learn a lot about the Chicago Bears football team during that stretch. You're not going to be favored in any game but the New Orleans game. You're going to have to find a way with Caleb and Jane Daniels to handle the pressure of that matchup at Washington, the site of the Fail Mary last year. So there's an emotional thing there. And then, don't worry, you have to go against Baltimore and Cincinnati, 2 of the top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. It's a slog. That is a slog. Not to mention, obviously Detroit twice, Green Bay twice, Minnesota twice. There's a lot not to like this schedule, just like every other NFC North team. I think you can tell my excitement for Chicago. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do as far as what their record will be when we predict it, but I think a lot of, if you're just a casual, or the Bears aren't your team and you follow national media stuff, you're seeing a lot of hate towards the Bears of Caleb Williams and a lot of just clickbait stuff because it really, truly does well. Chicago's a giant market. It's got a giant fan base, probably 3rd or 4th biggest fan base behind Dallas, Pittsburgh, Green Bay, the Niners. They're right there in that next group. And obviously Caleb himself has been a hot button topic since he transferred to USC and became the quarterback in Los Angeles. So I think you're going to see them quiet some of the talk early on. I think you're going to see what I expect to be a really hot start from the Chicago Bears early on. And then I think it gets tough. And then we'll see what kind of mettle they have at the end of the year to stay competitive for one of those wild card slots.
It's a great time to be a Chicago Bears fan. There's a lot of excitement. This year will be very telling, as you point out. And there's a lot of reason for optimism here ahead of this season. I agree. I think 9 wins is very much attainable for this group. And while some may say, that's not good enough with the talent that we're expecting to be on display week in and week out, that's really good relative to the schedule they've put out. If they can get to 9 wins to, God, dare I say 10 wins this season, that would be a massive upgrade, especially because that would likely mean that they've played incredibly well to be able to get 10 wins against this slog of a schedule. So I do think that that's a very important aspect into how we're going to have to evaluate the Chicago Bears this year. It's really going to be more about the eye test than it is about the box scores. But the box scores still need to be pretty good. And we should see a better run game. The big thing about the Colson Loveland draft pick is that, Ben Johnson obviously loves to run 12 personnel. And the big reason that's helpful to a quarterback in many ways is because that one gives you options. You now have several more options on, is it going to be a run or a pass, because you could do more with that formation. But on top of it, they pair 2 tight ends with such great complementary skill sets. Colson Loveland could be one of the best, all-around tight ends in football pretty soon. But you get two guys that complement their skill sets really well and can not only aid this run game, but Ben Johnson, I expect to see doing a lot of very interesting formations and trickery to throw defenses off, because all of these weapons, Mark, is kind of a nightmare to stack up against. Forget what you know about the Chicago Bears of the past. To have to line up against a DJ Moore or Rome Odunze, who I expect a big year from, to have to line up against, the size and speed of, Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet there. Oh, and have to deal with DeAndre Swift, who's certainly no slouch as a running back in the league, and a dual threat quarterback who can get you in several different ways and has the arm to make those big plays downfield. You have to account for too much. And so I expect to see a ton of 12 personnel early this year. I expect the tight ends to have a lot of involvement, and which is really going to open things up for the DJ Moores of the world. Hopefully DeAndre Swift can get off to a really solid start, because, that Ben Johnson's big MO has been at what he's able to do with a run game and the things that opens up for the quarterback. All of that is really exciting. And you mentioned the staff he's put together. Dennis Allen is a better... See, that's the thing about having a defensive head coach. If you have a defensive head coach, they better be like really freaking good at defense, right?
And he is.
For all the hate that Tomlin gets, he knows defense. Like he really does compile and put together a great unit there and gets the schemes working. Eberflus wasn't, he was a really good defensive coordinator in Indianapolis. And I think him becoming a head coach kind of made him have to take a back seat to certain things, because while we did see some improvement, he got Montez Sweat in there, and all of a sudden, the defense was transformed. It wasn't, what I think you would say as a Bears fan that you were hoping and expecting from a guy who's coming in as the defensive guy. Mike Vrabel, we expect that. We expect this defense to be good pretty early on. Dan Quinn did it last year with Washington. So Ben Johnson coming in and being able to get a guy like Dennis Allen, hey, you might have had upgrades all across the board, my friend. And it's exciting to be in Chicago, and I expect big things from them this year too.
Yeah, I'll end on one final point. I think it's important for me personally to make sure that Caleb plays 17 games. I struggled. One of my biggest struggles when I had to defend Justin Fields was that I never felt like Justin Fields could truly get going, because every 5 weeks it was an ankle, it was a dislocated finger. And when you just continue to miss a game here, a game there, and then you have to pick it back up, it's really, really tough for a young quarterback, especially one that has a big learning curve like Justin had. Caleb in year one with Ben Johnson, again, another thing is he took 68 sacks last year and wasn't injured. He played 70 games. He's a tough little SOB. And I think, again, it's just one of these things I hope for Bears fans' sakes and for Caleb's sake, he's able to have a high production quality year, maybe sneak into the playoffs, maybe not, but be in the range of that. And people look at that and go, holy crap. Like, by the end of the year, look at what this team went through as far as the games they had to play against big time opponents. They upset some people. They lost some games maybe they should have won, but the sky is the limit for this team in a year from now. And maybe they shock the world and surprise people this year, and they catch people off guard. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to predict that, but I just think that there's, again, if you're just listening to national voices like Jason McIntyre today on the Herd filling in for Colin, like, that's a joke. Like, we're not hearing any love from Ben Johnson. He's not praising his quarterback. What has Ben Johnson ever done to give you an idea that he would say publicly anything positive?
Well, that's the thing. Like, what you never heard Ben Johnson talk as an offensive coordinator. So how do you know what his style is, even as a head coach?
If you're truly on the ground listening to Ben Johnson press conferences, he's kind of an asshole. Like, he's not like Sean McVay, or he's not like Mike McDaniel. He's a lot more straightforward,
Yeah, to the point, like
no
no nonsense.
nonsense.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that's a different, because we see these young offensive guys, you kind of think they're fun and they're good looking, and he fits that. But then all of a sudden it's like, no, he's kind of a stick in the mud and he's kind of a hard ass. So I don't take in any of that type of stuff. But again, if you're only listening to the national media, you might be saying, oh, Chicago's probably going to be a dumpster fire. Caleb's not that good. Don't just don't be surprised if this team is really competitive and they're putting up some big performances early in the year. We'll see how that lasts, and can it go throughout the whole year.
yep, absolutely. That was
You
fun.
ready for the
That was
AFC
great.
North?
That's great. Yeah,
Fun.
let's get to the AFC North. I will start with the Baltimore Ravens, the defending
You better.
AFC North champs. Another team obviously that, like Buffalo, just hasn't been able to get to the big game, and that's kind of been the mark on Lamar Jackson and the mark on this team for several years now. Can Henry still be the top dog? Does he still have the tread on the tire? I think so, and I think that he landed in the perfect spot last year to be with a team that's not going to be as demanding of him in terms of being the guy on offense, but he still toted the rock quite a bit, and had a more than successful campaign. So this running game should likely be the same, and we're talking about a team that really didn't have Keaton Mitchell for the vast majority of the year, and he was really their big play running back threat. You bring him back into the mix. Now you can even mix in Justice Hill, not as an actual complimentary back, but a very specialized back. And maybe they can have a really healthy rotation in there to extend the lifespan of this backfield. So I think that's a big key coming into this season. Can the defense take the next step? When Mike McDonald leaves, there was already kind of questions about the personnel, like they were losing guys. Patrick Queen left, and now they drafted Kyle Hamilton. They've kind of revamped the deep.
He just got a big deal today too.
Yeah,
you see that $100 million for safety, first
huge
ever
signing,
million,
and he's really good, and he can play in a lot of different areas. It's a great signing by them. Metabuike, obviously, we've seen how dominant he can be. So they've got some dudes. Can they put it together as a unit and be the well-rounded team that we know Baltimore to have been for so many years? And really, they came on later into the season where they were really hitting their stride. Can they pick up where they left off last year instead of having to have kind of a slower start defensively? I think that's super important. Big question mark. What are they going to do with this schedule? Because I don't know. I'm not a Ravens diehard fan, obviously, so I don't know how to compare to previous schedules. This is a really, really tough schedule, Mark. And so my big question for the Ravens is, can they sustain, can Lamar Jackson have an MVP type season when you've got to start the year on the road at Buffalo? Oh, but never mind. A couple weeks later, it's Detroit. It's the Chiefs. The Texans are a slight, reprieve. But then you've got the Rams, the Bears at home at least. But, do we expect the Bears to be pretty good? I think so. I think the Bears are going to give them a run for their money. Not an easy one. Going to Miami in October, not the easiest road trip, but obviously they stack up pretty well with them. But then you really look at the ending of the season with Pittsburgh twice, on the road at Lambeau. They got to play the Bengals twice as well. There's going to be some really, really tough divisional games for them late in the season. I just don't see many pockets here where it's like, oh, what a relief. We get this 3-game stretch. Maybe Minnesota, Cleveland, and the Jets, I guess. But, you're on the road for 2 of those games too. So I think it's going to be hard for them to kind of get off to a strong start because they're going to be so tested early on with the Bills, Lions, Chiefs, and Rams, especially, to where I think we're gonna really know what this Rams team is about, come mid-season and really be able to find out, are they going to be able to go toe-to-toe with the best in the league? Now, the good news for them is, they've had some injuries in the past. Lamar has battled his too. They're going to get these tough matchups early in the year where they're at full health, full strength. So can they, show that they can go toe to toe and actually get wins against these guys? I think that bodes at least well for them that it comes here early on versus late in the season. But all those divisional games, those road games late, man, that's a tough one to overcome, even for a team that has shown that they can get there year in and year out. Eventually, Mark, the Grim Reaper comes, and this team has been knocking on the doorstep for so long that it's imperative for them not just to have good season, but they've got to win this division again. They've got to come back and show that they're still the top dog. They've got to make that run. They've got to get to the Super Bowl. To me, it's enough already. This has been a Super Bowl or bust for a couple years now. Same way I feel about Buffalo, but neither team has been able to get there. And so Baltimore, hey, it's time's knocking, because Cincinnati is fully healthy and ready to go. That offense isn't going anywhere. The Steelers, I think, are greatly improved overall. They're not going anywhere. Cleveland, okay, whatever. But it's a tough division. And so they're going to have their work cut out for them early on. But they've got the dudes. There's no question about it. They've got the dudes. And they didn't lose a whole lot this year. So you feel overall pretty good about the guys that they have, at least roster construction.
Yeah, I think you nailed so much there. This is the same thing. It's a rinse and repeat from the NFC North. If you can get to this 12-win total, then I think they'll win the division, right? I think with this schedule, if you're getting 12 wins, you're winning this division.
12 wins the AFC.
This is year 8 for Lamar Jackson. 3 of his 8 years, he should have been the MVP. He was 2 of them. Last year, listen, I'm glad Josh got it, because Josh led the Bills to an incredible, and he did it with less. But the numbers for Lamar Jackson last year, Dan,
crazy.
66% completion. His most passing yards, 4,177. His most passing touchdowns, led the league 41, or maybe Joe Burrow did, but 41 touchdown passes. Only 4 interceptions. The dude also ran for 915 yards.
Incredible year.
And 4 touchdowns. His third highest rushing total. He's been over 1,000 twice. He is as sure as a bet as there is in the NFL to have an MVP season. Lamar Jackson is going to throw for over 3,800 yards. He's going to complete 65% of his balls. He's going to throw for 30-plus touchdowns. He's not going to throw over 10 interceptions. And he's going to have over 800 yards rushing and a couple touchdowns if he's healthy. That's what he's going to do. He is phenomenal. He's an incredible talent. He is quickly becoming, in my opinion, kind of the Phillip Rivers of his generation, in the sense, I know this is weird, it's a weird comparison, but in the sense that he's building a resume numbers-wise that's going to be undoubtable as a Hall of Fame. Now, he's going to get it already because the MVP's over the guys like Matt Ryan, who's only got 1, who's probably not an MVP, even though he's got good numbers. He's building the numbers plus the hardware, even though it's not Super Bowl hardware.
Yeah.
And so,
no, it's an interesting comparison, because I was thinking the Baltimore Ravens are they becoming the Chargers of the teams that had really good teams every year but didn't get over the hump, or the one play they couldn't make,
Yeah, and we talk about Lamar, kind of how we talk about Phillip. He's probably the 4th best quarterback in the NFL. Like, if you're taking 1, 2, 3, 4, who are the top 4? Just like we talked about Rivers, he's not Peyton, he's not Tom, he's not Drew Brees. But then you're probably like Phillip Rivers, Aaron Rodgers, like those were, for a time, like that was a stretch where it's like he's that next guy up in that regard. That's a weird comparison. I don't know if I love it the more I'm talking about it. But I think what I was trying to say is that
I don't think he was in conversation for number 4, but top 10 certainly.
I think what I'm trying to say is the numbers are going to be there, right? Like, he is a numbers machine. He puts up gaudy numbers. And listen, I know that it's all about rings in the NFL. It's all about rings in every sport. But you do play the games, and the games in the regular season do matter. And he is, without a doubt, quickly becoming one of the 10 greatest regular season quarterbacks of all time. Maybe is already, you could make the argument, he is a 10 best regular season quarterback of all time. Similar, maybe the comparison's more Peyton Manning. Honestly, it's the MVPs. He's loading up on MVPs. Peyton Manning loaded up on MVPs. He loaded up on gaudy stats
for a while.
Yeah. And you'd have to argue, is he better than Brady, even though Brady's got more rings, whatever it might be. I love Lamar. I love watching Lamar. I love that Lamar's attitude. I said it last year after he got the big contract signed. Watch, he's going to go off because he's a hardworking dude. And when you show him love, he's going to put it out there. We don't have to worry about Lamar Jackson's work ethic going into the year. We haven't heard one peep out of Lamar Jackson from Ravens camp nationally. Now, maybe the local reporters have heard stuff, but nationally, not one peep. You add in the fact that I love what you said about the running back group. It is terrific. Derrick Henry leading the way with Hill and Mitchell. Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins, a really good wide receiver core. Zay Flowers is a really fun number one. He's like Tyreek Hill diet or light. I mean, he's not what Tyreek Hill was at his peak, but he's darn close. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely's injured to start the year, but again, a really solid tight end group as well. A good offensive line with Ronnie Staley, Linderbaum, Faalele. You mentioned on defense, Madubuike, Roquan Smith, Kyle Van Noy, Jair Alexander.
Jair, yeah.
You added Marlon Humphrey, and then, of course, Hamilton, who got the big deal today. One of the things you didn't mention, I think, is going to be a story for them is if they struggle kicking the football.
Yeah.
Kyle Tucker's out. He'll probably never play in the NFL again now he's got to handle his Deshaun Watson accusations and whatever happens to that. But he is, before that, a Hall of Fame level kicker, which there are very few of. And so that's different. You mentioned the schedule being tough. It is tough. I do think, though, it's really, they have workable stuff in there, right? They do get Detroit at home, Houston at home, Rams at home. The late game at Green Bay in the end of the year, I think, could be an interesting one because I think they're both going to be playing for a ton. Obviously, there's late Steeler games. This division is truly the black and blue division. No one plays themselves harder in division than the Browns, the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Steelers. They love killing each other. But they do get Jets, Miami, New England, Minnesota, Chicago. They have some games where it's like you look at their roster, their quarterback versus who they're playing. The Browns twice. There should be easy W's. The problem is it's kind of always the letdown spot, right? It's always right before a big game or right after a big game. And we see that happen in the NFL sometimes. You're all in on the Buffalo Bills, and maybe you lose that game, and then you play the Jets the game after, whatever it is. I'm not looking at the schedule. And then it's like, wait, how did we lose to the Jets too? Because it was a letdown or whatever it might be, right?
Trap games
and things like that. So I think the Ravens have to look out for that. If the Ravens get to 12 wins, they'll win the division. They have the best regular season quarterback in the NFL right now, and I think they're very capable of getting 12 wins. I think they should be the favorite in the division to start the season for sure.
Yeah, they only get a 3-day break after the Jets to then play Cincinnati and go on that Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati stretch too. So, yeah, they are going to have to. But, last year I remember they had there were plus 20 extra rest days than their opponents league wide. It was like the largest gap in NFL.
It always comes around. It always circles back.
This year they're getting they're not getting as much of a help in that regard.
Dan, why don't I go to Cleveland next? Let's just get them out of the way because I think Cincy
this will be a 5-minute conversation. Personally.
Yeah. I'm going to make a prediction. I think that Flacco, Gabriel, and Sanders all start multiple games. I don't think that's crazy. I think a lot of people feel that way. I think if you were to truth serum Kevin Stefanski and the Browns front office, I think they all feel really good. I think they know Jimmy Haslam is looking at them going, I'm confident if you want to be my head coach, you're going to be my head coach, Kevin Stefanski. I know this is going to be maybe a tough year. But I think it would be doing themselves a disservice if Gabriel and Sanders don't start at least 2 to 3 games each. Because, again, Cleveland Browns.
Oh, you got to know what you got.
One of the things that's going to be talked about throughout the season, maybe I'm the first one letting you know it now, they have 2 first-rounders in 2026. They have multiple 5th-rounders, multiple 6th-rounders, multiple 7th-rounders in 2026. So if there is one team that – first off, they could be getting the number 1 pick because they just don't have a ton of talent. But if there's one team that has the ability to make the deal to get to the spot they want to be at, to pick whatever quarterback they want to pick, The Cleveland Browns are that team. Now, the weapons they do have, running back Ford and Judikins, obviously, we keep our eye on Judikins. He's a storyline coming into this year. Jerry Jeudy and Njoku are the only pass catchers worth anything, but they're both very quality at their positions. I don't think anyone arguing that Jerry Jeudy is a top 10 wide receiver. I don't think anyone's already arguing that Njoku's a top 5 tight end, but they're both well above average quality players. The O-line is still solid with Bentonio, Teller, and Conklin. So it's not a barren group, but it's certainly not great, especially when you look at their schedule. Because again, they're in the NFC North and they play AFC North and they played the NFC North. A lot of tough games. On defense, Myles Garrett, obviously one of the top 3 defensive players on the planet. Denzel Ward, Devin Bush, the rookie Mason Graham. I'm really interested to see how he pairs with Myles Garrett. I think that defense has bite. I think they're going to be really stingy at times, and they're going to be fun. The problem will be, I think they're going to see some 3 and outs, a lot of 3 and outs on offense. They're going to be playing a lot on defense. Finally, I'll say, where could we maybe see the quarterback changes, right? We know we're starting with Flacco. I think that's the right call. You don't want to bench Flacco and then bring him in week 9. That does nothing for you. Weeks 1 through 6, tough. Cincy, at Baltimore, Green Bay, at Detroit, Minnesota, at Pittsburgh. What the fuck? That's 0-6 if I've ever smelled it for a team to start. And I think you just let Joe Flacco go through that slog. Week 7 through 8 is where I think you maybe see the first change, right? 7 is Miami, 8 is New England, and then week 9 is the bye. So if you go to Gabriel week 7, you give him Miami, New England. If he plays well, you give him the bye and you keep going with him. If he's a disaster against teams that you should be more competitive against, especially that he'll have more practice time, sit and watch for 7-8 weeks, then you can get Shedeur ready during the bye. And then Shedeur, weeks 10 through 12, gets the Jets, Baltimore, and the Raiders. Give him that 3-game stretch to say, hey, we'll give you the Raiders and the Jets. We'll excuse you if you struggle against Baltimore. So I think that's kind of the only thing to really watch out for this Cleveland team this year.
Yeah, no, I echo everything you said. It is going to be about the quarterbacks. I think this year really should be finding out what they have in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. But as you mentioned, they're starting with Joe Flacco, and we think ultimately it is the good move, but that they will eventually turn to those 2 quarterbacks. I do think their draft class was interesting. Like Mason Graham, I'm excited to see kind of what that defensive front is able to do, because it could be really, really intense.
Nasty.
And the young running backs, they got 2 of them. That could be really intriguing. We know Kevin Stefanski's, one to dial up some really solid run schemes. So they can have some intrigue this year, some things to look out for, not a total waste of a season as it's felt the last couple years. So there are things to look for and things to build with. But again, you mentioned it, like next year's draft class is what everybody's looking at. So look, you either strike gold with one of these 2 quarterbacks and you say, wow, now we can just take our 2 picks that we have next year and continue to build around this person, or we'll use our picks and get the top guy next season. So that really is what it feels like. Yes, are we dismissing Cleveland? 100%. I'm dismissing Cleveland this season. I will be shocked if they are contenders at any point for the division.
Look at that start. How can
brutal.
they be?
It's brutal. Yeah. I mean, man, 2-4 is like seemingly best case scenario.
That would be incredible. If they end up 2-4 through week 6, extension right there. Yeah. I will say really quickly, I just want to ask you, if you had a crystal ball and you could predict this is what Shedeur Sanders will remind us of or look like this year when and if we get to see him, what is your feeling on at the pro level when it's live bullets what Shedeur Sanders looks like?
My guess, I feel like he's a guy kind of with the ceiling of a Mark Sanchez. Like I think I could see a Mark Sanchez type output. Someone who you're like, okay, like he can operate this offense. He's accurate. He can move around, but he's not one to consistently make the big plays or be clutch or elevate to that top echelon of quarterback in the league. That's personally how I view him. Now, for a Mark Sanchez who went first round, I think that's kind of a steal to get that type of guy in the 5th round where they got him. So hey,
yeah, he had a nice run. He had a nice run when he started. He
Um,
just didn't have the physicality to last.
Yeah. And I think I think he's a lot better than Dylan Gabriel personally. I think he's the better quarterback. Clearly Cleveland, how they've stacked the depth chart to start doesn't feel that way. So we'll see. But yeah, that's my initial gut. If I were to find what's a comp, would be Mark Sanchez maybe.
I think his ceiling is Tua slash Bo Nix. I think he's a little bit more mobile than Tua, but I think he's a little his ball placement and accuracy is more like Tua than maybe Nix, but he's a little bit more physical and capable of handling the NFL maybe than Tua, maybe not as much as Nix. I think he's some kind of weird mix of that.
Hybrid.
He gets lucky in the sense that he's going to get an offensive coach, and by the time he does get in there, it's not week one. He'll have some time to really acclimate to the live bullets and what it looks like in the feel of the game. I would be shocked if at the end of the year we are talking about Shedeur Sanders like we talked about even Drake May, where you're like, dude, they should feel really good. I feel very strongly at this point in time, Cleveland will be targeting a quarterback in the 1st round next year as they're trying to get their guy, whoever that guy might be. I see maybe them using him as trade bait. I think he plays well enough to get a job somewhere. You know what I mean? And then and maybe have a chance to kind of grow into a role somewhere. But I don't see it being like a CJ Stroud type situation. No.
Fair enough. All right, take us to Cincinnati. We'll close out with
Cincy Watsky. 43 touchdowns for Joe Burrow. So he did lead the league in touchdown passes. 70%, 4,918 yards, 9 interceptions. Wow. I mean, I loved that last year for Joe Burrow because when he plays 17 games, he's doing the things that Patrick Mahomes was doing 4 years ago. And I get that the NFL is kind of split offensively into 3 categories. The last 5 years, there was only 2 categories, right? You were a big play offense like the Chiefs used to be, where we're going to stretch the field. We're going to have guys who get behind you, and we're going to have quarterbacks to make those throws. That's what Joe Burrow is still doing to this day. That's what Josh Allen does a lot. That's what Lamar Jackson does a lot. That's what the Eagles do a lot with Jalen Hurts. When we're throwing the ball, it's big plays with big receivers, beating guys in man coverage and exposing flaws in your defense. The other offense that's really come alive recently, passing-wise, is this Andy Reid new offense he's morphed into, which is we are going to bubble screen and get guys. We're going to have a run game that's a passing game. And those 2 offensives have both worked. We've seen teams win championships with both. And I think the third offense you're really seeing now take a real hold in the NFL too is the mix of the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, and I would now add in Ben Johnson's kind of weird also and Jim and Harbaugh's kind of weird aesthetic to that, which is actually we're a run first, motion offense that is going to do a lot of play action. So I think you have 3 real styles, and I give the Bengals a lot of credit because right now they're just owning the fact that we got 2 studs in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and we have a guy that throws the best ball in the league right now. I think he's the most talented arm quarterback in the NFL right now. I think he's taken the title from Mahomes purely because Mahomes, in the last couple of years, either they're not asking him to do it, he doesn't have the talent to do it, consistently with what they're giving him wide receiver wise, but Mahomes is still maybe the number 1 overall. But I think that Joe Burrow's taken over a little bit of the mantle of his arm and the plays he makes with his arm. It's just not questionable how talented he is. Offensive line, there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad, right? The good, Orlando Brown Jr. and Mims, the tackle. The bad, they have Lucas Patrick as a starting guard. Lucas Patrick is a guy, Bears fans, we went through it 2 years ago. He is a absolute revolving door. He's trash. He's not a starting capable guard. That just goes straight there in trouble. Now they do.
And they lost Alex Kappa too.
Yes, they do have the rookie left guard Fairchild who's starting. So you hope maybe someone else can develop, and they have to start the season with Patrick, but they can find a way to upgrade. It's going to be on them to find ways to help protect the interior rush when they're going up against the Mason Grahams of the world in those games. And I'll say this, defensively, thank God they got Trey Hendrickson signed, because if they didn't, listen, I like Shamir Stewart from Texas A&M, the rookie. I think he's going to be a very fine pro. I like the rookie Demetrius Knight Jr. from South Carolina, I believe. He's starting at linebacker. I think he was a third-round pick, but I think he's popped a little bit. Like he's got big upside. So they've invested youth in the defense, and that's good. You hope they'll grow as the season goes on. Listen, weeks 13 through 15, this is it for Cincinnati. It's Baltimore, at Buffalo versus Baltimore. Baltimore, Buffalo, Baltimore. 13, 14, and 15. That will be where they decide their season. Yep. If they're around 500 going into that stretch and they go 3-0, then they're the hottest team in football and everyone's picking them to win a Super Bowl. If they're around 500 in that stretch and they go 0-3 or 1-2, it's another Joe Burrow needs more help and the Browns ownership group is failing Joe Burrow type of scenario. So that's going to be the key stretch to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down Burrow wins MVP, but will it matter? And that's kind of ultimately how I feel. I think he's going to be the MVP this season. I think he's going to have an incredible year. He's been hovering, obviously. Did last year too, but he just wasn't on a good enough team for it to matter. So that's a big question mark. Despite how well they play offensively, are they going to have a defense remotely good enough to keep them in games at all? And that's a big question. I think Chase Brown's a really exciting running back. So I think that there's more to get, more juice to squeeze out of that backfield with Chase Brown. And so I think that's an extra element to this offense that maybe they hadn't had in a couple years, right? With the Zach Mosses and, even the tail end with Joe Mixon with the injuries and everything like that. They seem to have a true bell cow guy that can do it all on the field, and that opens things up for them for sure. Obviously, you've got Higgins and Chase, extremely talented. Eric All is a big body tight end that, does he break out in year two like we tend to see from sophomore tight ends? Which it always tends to happen, and so there's a lot there. Jermaine Burton, another guy who they were high on but had character issues. And, is he going to be a number 3 wide receiver that is just another big play waiting to happen? The question is the defense for sure. And I will say, outside of that stretch you mentioned, out of these two divisions we talked about, they have the easiest schedule, I think, of it all. Not just how it's laid out, but, in terms of everyone they play, ending the year with Arizona and Cleveland is a gift.
It's a huge gift.
Starting the year with Cleveland, Jacksonville, Minnesota.
Huge gift.
I mean, they can start 3-0. That's very conceivable. And then they go into Denver, a game that they can win. They can easily win that game. Denver's tough. It's in Mile High, but they can win that. So they start 4-0. Okay, now you're going into the Detroits and the Pittsburghs. But then you get the Jets and Chicago. So worst case, you go 2-2 during that stretch. If you're 4-0, you're 6-2, heading into that, brutal, run. So I think there's a lot here for Cincinnati to take advantage of. It's whether or not the defense is going to even be able to keep them afloat. But I think the way their schedule stacks up, they can get themselves in a position where it's looking pretty good and they can go into that really, really difficult stretch with a little bit of cushion. instead of going into that stretch 500. I think that will be key for sure.
No team needs to start 1-0 more than the Cincinnati Bengals,
Yeah,
just to turn the vibes. Like they need the vibes of
absolutely.
it. They need
yeah,
the
get
vibes
that win early on.
All right.
Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I will say I'll let you go off. I just want to say one thing before we start with Pittsburgh.
Okay.
To me right now, and it's not just because of you and not because of our podcast, there is not a team besides my own that I'm just more absolutely fascinated by for week one than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I will say this, they also are the team that I would argue I could be the least fascinated by like week 8, 9, 10, because so much of it is just this. What does Aaron have left in the tank? What does this pairing with Mike Tomlin look like? And so I want you to know I'm so excited. I think a lot of people, I think I share that sentiment with a lot of people. Your team has a ton of eyes on them to start the year.
Yeah, they're a very intriguing team. There's a lot of question marks, as you mentioned, about what will go right. Is Aaron Rodgers going to have a full season of health ahead of him? If he does, then, I personally project good things to happen for Pittsburgh. Arthur Smith, that pairing, it seems to be a good one. My big question really around this offense outside of Aaron Rodgers, which is the big one, does he have the chemistry with the receiving core? Does he actually feel confident in Arthur Smith's system? Because I think that plays a big part in what we've seen from Aaron, where he goes rogue and does his own thing. Does he feel confident enough to actually play within the system and get the most out of it? The question is, outside of DK Metcalf, it's a very, very thin receiving core, like a lot of question marks as I've been brought to light. Thank you to my beautiful wife who has given me light here as I go off on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's really, they are one injury away from being made a SOS. What are we doing here? We're going to have to make a big trade at wide receiver. And they've put themselves in that position, to be fair. So that's their bet. They're going to have to lay in it. If they get a full season healthy of DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers, then I think that we can really start to see something special. And by special, I mean probably 11 wins, but looking good doing it, not ending the year on a 5-game losing streak, and getting some momentum going into the playoffs. I think Aaron Rodgers does, from what I've seen, have it left in him to run this system, which I had questions about at first, which is the wide zones. There's a lot of movement for the quarterback required there. He's looked pretty good. They held him out for the preseason for a reason. They were like, we're not going to risk it. We're not going to do anything to kind of jinx the situation. He's looked fine in practice. We're going to keep it that way. We'll save everything for the regular season. These are big what ifs, but if he's healthy all year long, I do have confidence that this is going to be the best quarterback play that the Pittsburgh Steelers have seen since maybe 2018 Ben. And that's a big thing. That's a big lift. I felt that way going into last year, and you could argue they did get the best quarterback play since,
in total, yeah.
In total out of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. But I even feel that this is another step forward, even from the play that we got from those two when it comes to passing the football. The key, the X factor for making all of that work, the way Arthur Smith has designed this offense, the way Mike Tomlin wants to play offense and play football games, this run game needs to be a top 5 run game in the NFL. They just have to be. They were back half and bottom 12 for good portions of the season last year. That can't cut it with the way that you've designed this team, with the systems you put in place, with the amount of 13 personnel I think we're going to see this year. It has to be good. Everything is going to run through that run game. And so to me, that's the biggest thing. Can they get out of Jaylen Warren what they couldn't out of Najee Harris, which was big plays, which was hitting the hole fast and getting there and reading those zone reads versus, Najee Harris, who's much more of a downhill, they hit the hole and go runner. You're going to have to get some good vision out of your running backs. I think that's what Jaylen Warren does well, and the rookie Caleb Johnson they're fit for. But does the offensive line coalesce and become better? That's going to have to turn into a top half group, which I think they have it in them to do it. And same with the run game. Run game is going to have to, maybe top 5 is a bit, lofty of an expectation, but top 10 for sure has to be, in order for this offense to work the way it's meant to, and in order for them to be effective in the passing game. Because regardless of how good Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf are, if they don't have a run game, then that duo is just not going to be good, because that's all that people have to worry about then at that point. Defensively, I don't think I have to speak too much on, because it's pretty obvious. The money's there, the talent's there. And even Tomlin and others have stated this season that they have the makings of being historic. You got to go out there and prove it. You have to be a top 3 defense this season. That's what it has to be. There are no other avenues for this group, unfortunately. It's just how that they've built it. So it's got to be an elite defense, and an elite defense all season long. None of this great defense in the first 12 weeks and then shit the bed when you've run into Philly and Baltimore and Cincinnati like they did last year, and all of a sudden they're terrible and worn down, to be quite fair. So that is the elephant in the room. Will this high-paid defense with all of the studs perform like a top 3 to 5 unit all season long? And will this run game develop consistency and be a top 10 run unit? If the answer to those 2 questions is yes come season's end, then I think we're looking at an 11-ish win team that makes the playoffs, pushes for the division, and maybe, just maybe, wins their first playoff game in nearly a decade. But those are the X factors. And obviously it all ties back to the health of Aaron Rodgers. But to me, if we're not talking about Aaron, those are the really big things. The back half of the schedule is pretty tough. But this isn't insurmountable, and last year's schedule was brutal. It's not like that. And so I expect, like, the expectation should be high for them. It should be to go and win your first playoff game, because the stakes have never been higher. They've pushed their chips in. They paid TJ Watt all that money. They're going to get the deal done with Cam Hayward. This is the last run for this group, I think. And they've shown that. That's why they got Jalen Ramsey. That's why they went and got Darius Slay and Aaron Rodgers. They want to get guys that are veterans, a different vibe in the room. And so this is it. It's all come to this. So my expectations for them is to make the playoffs. I'm not going to say the expectations to win the division. It's too difficult in the division, and I don't think that they're as talented of a team as Baltimore. But the expectation is to make the playoffs, and it's to win a playoff game. But really, I mean, gosh, by midseason, if they're doing well, the expectation is we got to make this the Cinderella story and make the run to the Super Bowl, because they're just not like, a lot of these guys are going to be gone, and who knows what the future holds. But yeah, that's my nuts and bolts of the Steelers ahead of 2025.
I mean, what a breakdown there. 10-7 last year. Aaron Rodgers played 17 games. He played all 17 games last
and he
year.
Looked really good the final 6, 7.
Yes, and so you hope that type of health and momentum carries over, right? And it carries over in the sense that they can get a hot start. At the Jets versus Seattle, at New England versus Minnesota, bye week early to regain their health, and then versus Cleveland. Got to find a way to go kind of 5-1 through week 6. And if they can do that, and Aaron Rodgers can build that momentum, then when the slog of the season and the nicks and the bumps and the bruises build up, and he turns 42, which he will towards the end of the season, I think in December.
I missed this from Cozen, but yeah, squeeze out the juice. We're gonna make that a thing.
Squeeze
make it a thing.
I absolutely. Is that then hopefully by then that defense is a top 3 defense and is carrying them, and they figured it all out. It's going to be really fun to watch Jalen Ramsey, Joey Porter Jr., Darius Slay, Alex Highsmith, Patrick Queen, Watt, who's the best defensive player in football, Cam Hayward, that defense is going to be fun to watch, especially in that division.
Yeah. And they're without their first round pick, Derek Harmon, for the first month, unfortunately now, or well, not officially the first month, but it's going to be a couple games minimum. Can he get on the train early enough to where they can get meaningful games out of him down the road? Because they're going to need that, because Cam's getting older and all of that too. And it's back-to-back years. Their first round pick's been injured. And so that's another thing, Mark, I didn't touch on real quick. I will, is Troy Fautanu was a top offensive tackle prospect last year. Like he's expected to be a stud. And unfortunately his rookie season ended before it really even began. He played a handful of snaps and he was done. He comes back as right tackle. They finally moved Broderick Jones, who they moved up to take in the mid first round just a couple years ago, finally move him to his true spot at left tackle. Those guys are going to matter, because Zach Frazier, their second round pick last year, is already a top 6 center in football. He had a great rookie year. They got young guys on that line. Can they form and really make this thing? I think they have the makings to be a really, really good offensive line, but they got to do it.
We spent a lot of time talking about my team with tight end play. I think your tight end play is also going to be extraordinarily. Yeah, right. Freiermuth is a very, very quality tight end. Jonnu Smith was who the talk. They went and got an explosive tight end for Aaron Rodgers. And then Darnell Washington is basically an extra tackle when he plays.
Yeah, he's like 6'9", 6'8",
6'9". And the red zone, if you're finding a way to get all three of those guys involved with DK Metcalf, that is the tallest position group in the NFL as far as Aaron Rodgers. The plays should just be, if you can't run it in, one of those tall guys, give them a chance.
They got to have a good red zone.
There's no way a defense can cover Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, and DK Metcalf within the 10-yard line. There's just no way. There is no team has the personnel to do that. They just don't. So finding ways to get those people involved. I'm going to give you a dark horse, in my opinion, as far as the most important name neither of us have mentioned yet. I want to hear what your thoughts are when I mention it, because it stood out to me as I was going through Pittsburgh doing research. Oh, this guy, Scotty Miller. He comes from Tampa, and this is a guy that is going to be the slot guy, right? He's going to be the white guy who we always say deceptively quick, Scotty Miller. You know what I mean? Aaron has always had that guy.
And he's talked about him too. I mean, he's talked him up big time.
Would it shock you if Scotty Miller's catching 70+ balls and get eaten up a ton of 3rd and 4s and 3rd and 5s and just picking up quick, easy first downs as probably a very sharp route runner that Aaron trusts? It wouldn't shock me at all.
Right. Yeah. Because they have their rookie from last year, Roman Wilson, who also was injured. And so he was a 3rd-round pick, a wide receiver that would fit that role. But Aaron Rodgers doesn't really trust those guys. And this is his first – he'll be seeing his first NFL action, essentially, outside of 4 snaps. So does he take over that role? I think we are going to see Scotty Miller, to your point, kind of fit that clutch security blanket early on. So,
I think the ceiling is it's hard. I think Pittsburgh's one of the highest floor teams. Again, this is all if everyone's for the majority healthy, right? Everyone's going to have some injuries. But if you're saying for the majority our core stays 90% healthy, which you need to have a chance at the playoffs. If your core guys stay 90, 80% healthy, Pittsburgh's floor, I think, is just so high because Mike Tomlin never has losing seasons.
Yeah, it's 9 wins, but the ceiling might be 11.
And it's hard. It's hard. If they had, I'm trying to think of the right name, like a healthy Tank Dell. Right. If they had
it's a big play guy or something.
Like a healthy Roma Dunze, someone
Jameson
else.
Williams. Yeah.
Yes. To just go right next to DK to take just that extra tiny bit of pressure off him. I think you could argue the ceiling is closer to that 13 win. If everything's healthy. But I also think this is a team that is going to try to win football games in a very control the football, long drives, in an annoying way.
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers is going to be annoying. And then one or two big plays a half to DK and into a weapon, and hope Warren breaks one. And then a defense that's just going to hopefully suffocate the you-know-what out of you.
Yeah.
With that front seven, it's just nasty. And then you go, oh, okay, they have a nasty front seven. Well, that's got to help their inexperienced back end. No.
With Jalen
Ramsey, Darius Slay, Joey Porter Jr. It's like, holy moly.
Yeah, it's a really good defense, man. Like they and that's why the expectation should be for them to be like the best.
I'm very excited to see where you have Pittsburgh when we do our
Me too. Me too. I haven't gone through their schedule to like pick wins and losses yet. So I'm curious to see where I end up having them too.
I will say, as we wrap this up, I did do FanDuel did something really cool on yesterday. They did a first ever Futures Day, where throughout the whole day, they just had a bunch of different specials on all NFL futures, win totals, individual stats, Super Bowl winners, division winners, conference winners. It was so much fun. And they get a bunch of profit boosts and all that. I will say, if anyone wants just an inkling of where I'm thinking, I did parlay over 4,000 yards passing and over 30 touchdowns for Caleb Williams.
Damn, let's go.
Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer, have never had someone throw for 30 touchdowns. As Jay Cutler is about to spend 4 days in prison. I don't know if you saw that.
I did see that, actually.
And
they pleaded guilty too.
Smoking Jay, I love you, Smoking Jay. Respect, you'll be fine. And then I did also, because it was just too juicy, the odds, and it's going to be fun for me to track all year. 10 or more wins for the Chicago Bears. So I did bet those things. I'm not saying I'm going to pick it next week.
Yeah. But it's fun to root for it.
It's fun to root for it all year long. Yeah, all year long. Extra
juice to squeeze now.
I don't know how this season's going to impact me emotionally. But I really
hope we're along for the ride, as always. Yeah. And hopefully you all will be along for the ride with us. So, just like last year, we're going to have episodes every week recapping the week that was. Next week, be on the lookout Wednesday before or Thursday morning, at least, before NFL games kick off. We are going to unveil our playoff predictions and give you our breakdowns of each division, who's winning, who's getting in, and that's always a fun episode. So we're gonna go live next Wednesday, and then we're ready for some football. So appreciate y'all being along for the journey, and we'll see you next week.